Continuing our world tour for the Chaos Dwarfs, the Dawizar have come to the deserts of Nagaroth, where Malus, Darkblade, and the Dark Elves are about to unleash a host of trained raptors. The Noglir, or Cold Ones as they're more commonly known, may not seem like the strongest choice for dealing with armored infantry, but naturally, they'll have some help from executioners, and there's more than Ironsworn to worry about on the other side. Once again, I am playing against Falcon, and today's theme is Malus at the Palace, the Scourge of Cain, riding the fearsome beast Spite, and wielding the Demon's Curse. Malus Darkblade is, of course, a tank lord of epic proportions, with great dueling and high durability, especially with that regen from his Warp Sword. Like that fateful night in 2004, he's gearing up to charge into the stands and beat the piss out of the unwashed masses, and something he's been really good at since the release of Warhammer 3. It's really hard to kill this dude, and he is fantastic for killing armored, high-value targets. As for the rest of the Sildred Tor Dark Elves army, got a combination of Bleak Swords and Dread Spears, Sorceress of the Lore of Beast with Pan's Pelt, spell I like a lot with cav builds, can actually overcast it and get an AoE, so 3 or 4 cav units all at once, benefiting from physical resist, melee defense, and speed. Pretty nice. 2 Cold One Knights, which are a threat to monsters and bull centaurs, maybe not quite as statted up as I'd like for what are relatively elite regiments in the source material, but they still get the job done. In the center, the famously squishy but expert blade-wielding executioners, for some punch versus armored infantry, and the Knights of the Ebon Claw, which are the linchpin and hammer of the entire build. Very thematic Cold One army for Malus Darkblade as he defends his home turf, but here at the Red Desert, Hobgoblins have already taken the hill, followed by a Sorcerer Prophet of the Lore of Fire, mounted on a Bale Taurus, Vial of Hashut, Piercing Bolts of Burning, Fireball, and the Infernal Engineer passive, which I think was mistakenly brought in this game, because Falcon doesn't have any artillery or war machines here. Below are Hashut's Dark Ravagers, bunch of Stinky Slaves and Hobgoblins, and 2 units of Infernal Ironsworn, which will anchor the entire Dawizar army. Incredibly tanky with high armor and huge melee defense, they are the counterpart to Ironbreakers, have armor-piercing naphtha bombs that can devastate infantry. They're going to be really important in this game. Finally, rounding out the army is a Great Taurus, the non-flaming kind, which is honestly just freaking adorable. I don't know what it is about that bull, but it's really cute. It looks like a Pokemon. So Malus World Peace is all about love and friendship. We know that, and he wants to calmly and reasonably discuss with the Chaos Dwarfs what exactly they're doing in his backyard. That is until the Sorcerer Prophet whips out a flare pistol and blows a couple of Dread Spears away with a shot from the back of his Bale Taurus. Pretty rude way to announce yourself there, my guy, and Naked Breath attack will be avoided by the Executioners. Terrain advantage is heavily in favor of the Chaos Dwarfs. Because of their Vanguard shenanigans, they will have the crest of that hill. But the chaff fight is probably in favor of the Dark Elves because they have Brides of Cain to blend them, and Bleak Swords are, of course, way better than Slaves or Sneaky Gits. With the downhill charge, Slaves are going to trade perhaps more favorably than they would otherwise, and of course, there are 2 big, scary SEMs that will be causing some terror routes and carnage in and amongst the Dark Elves front ranks, too. Malus is already activating his abilities. Pretty common thing I do with him, just put his abilities on cooldown because it's unlikely he's going to get into anything really important in the early stages of this battle. Might as well get whatever value you can out of those spells right from the word go. But as a Manticore is summoned, Executioners are already under threat from bombs and archer fire, while the Knights of the Ebon Claw and Witch Elves make their move. The good charge here, they could surround and utterly destroy the Chaos Dwarf right flank, which could open up an avenue of attack for the Cav. While that's great for the Druki, the Executioners are having a less than stellar time. Gap in the line was left open for them to charge through, but that just meant all kinds of focus fire being sent their way, and ideally this unit would have been deployed out to the side, where yeah, they'd be more vulnerable to monsters or cav, but way less likely to get focus fired into oblivion. And while I frequently find that the 100 armor on Executioners is of little consequence, that it just doesn't do anything for them, they're still insanely squishy. In this instance, it doesn't really matter. When you're getting exploded by AP naphtha bombs on a unit we know can devastate infantry with grenade volleys in the Infernal Ironsworn, this is often going to be the result, and it's dangerous to get in their fire arc at all with anything armored or expensive. Gotta be a little bit more cognizant and careful on that front. So certainly a good start for the Dawizar as their bulls rampage their way through Dread Spears, Cold One Knights coming up the hill to reinforce and potentially get a surround off. Executioners are fully committed now. They realize they're pretty much dead, but Transformation of Kadan and a Cold One Knight charge from behind may look to salvage something from the situation. Manticore diving into the rear to tie down the Hobgoblin Archers, while the Knights of the Ebon Claw sweep up the flank over on that side. More Knights charging up the hill. Sorceress of the Laurel Beasts rotating, wheeling her way into this direction, ready to cast more spells and maybe get a Pan's Pelt and Weiss's Wild Form down to buff up the Cav. Malus Darkblade is fighting in and amongst the Infernal Ironsworn, and that's an okay way for him to get value. The issue is they have 64 melee defense. Malus has 60 melee attack base, so he's actually not going to hit them all that often. It'll take a while for him to cut through anything with 64 MD, and that's one of those things about the elite of the Chaos Dwarf army. Very hard to kill. A lot of armor and a lot of MD. Infernal Ironsworn will hold the line for now, and Censor is just buckled for the armies of Sildric Tor. But as a Piercing Bolt of Burning rains down, Witch Elves will dodge all of that spell, charge into the rear of the Hobgoblin's Sneaky Gits, and slice them up. Their combination of speed, bonus infantry, and madness of Cain, their Witch Brew, could be a potent combo for taking down the chaff first, and later causing rampages on the high-value targets. Malus, meanwhile, is having a lot of issues pushing his way through the Ironsworn. Those models, only 3 or 4 of them can pin down even something as large as Spite, who is actually, I believe, in the source material, one of the smaller cold ones, but just known for being especially ferocious and loyal. I do believe he was the runt of his litter, though, so he's maybe compensating for physical deformities. But yeah, these Hobgoblin Sneaky Gits being torn apart by the Brides of Cain. Same can be said for the Dread Spears tasked with the unpleasant mission of taking down Ironsworn, who, with the lack of offensive magic, find themselves rather unbothered and kind of bored up to this point. But Malus has set his sights on bigger prey, and the Great Taurus has landed in the wrong neighborhood. This could be a huge pick for the Dark Elves. Malus and the Dreadknights, the coolest 80s metal band, full surround off and cooking up some prime A5 Wagyu. Blood Price has been activated, and Malus is finna cut himself up some filet mignon. Every time I make that joke, someone's like, that's not how you pronounce filet. It's like, dude, we know. You're not special because you know how to pronounce filet. It's not like some crazy French word. Filet mignon is really good, though. But yeah, I don't know how, but somehow the Great Taurus managed to escape from that full surround. That one kind of pissed me off because I like literally manually moved the heavy cav to get that full surround, and he still pushed his way through, so he escaped. It's not great. It's actually pretty big loss for the Dark Elves, because if the Taurus dies there, that's a huge swing on the balance of power, and at the moment, Chaos Dwarfs do have a clear advantage, and their infantry on this side, they need help from the cav immediately. They're not overextended, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is getting into the rear, shutting down the archers, but the cav needed to wheel all the way around the Infernal Ironsworn, and now they're coming in. So, big volley coming in from the Naphtha bombs on those Ironsworn too. So, Malus and his Dreadknights and the Cold One Knights, they need to do something right now to turn this game back in their favor, or this could quickly get out of hand. This is a big pick, taking out more of the Hobgoblin Archers while Malus goes in for the duel against the Sorcerer Prophet, a duel he can very much win. But Hashit's Dark Ravagers are nearby, and Dark Elves don't have any magic attacks, so getting through Guardian Aura and the massive HP of that Bale Taurus, that will prove difficult. Big charge from the Bull. It's absolutely running through those Witch Elves. But the Raptor Cav, the Knights of the Ebon Claw, are about to do the same thing to the Chaos Dwarf back line. Then they can collapse in and perhaps chunk their way through that prime A5 Wagyu. The Great Taurus and that Bale Taurus, both still large threats for the Dark Elves army, but so are Hashit's Dark Ravagers, and they've not even been touched up to this point. So, a transformation of Kadan, a Manticore summon will help. Demon's Curse, lowering leadership and melee defense on Hashit's Dark Ravagers, and now Malus Darkblade and his Cold One Knights are ready for the big show. They've got a surround off on the Bull Centaurs. It's actually exactly where they want to be. Piercing Bolts of Burning will try to clear them away, but they should be able to dodge the worst effects of that spell. And as more Cold One Knights wheel into position, Manticore went after the Hobgoblin Archers. Big charge following it up. And the Dark Elves are putting in some work here to drag this one back. Cold One Knights managed to dodge the entirety of that Piercing Bolts of Burning. And they are right back on target and chunking into Hashit's Dark Ravagers as the other Cold One Knights skewer a bunch of Hobgoblin archers and ensure they start running for the hills. So as these Bull Centaurs are torn apart by Malus Darkblade and his cavalry elite, the Dreadknights are looking for something else to chunk their way into and think that Lord Prophet on a Baal Taurus might just be the right target. This is a perfect Cav engagement. It does not get any better than that. There is nowhere for those Bull Centaurs to go, and no real way for the Sorcerer Prophet to punish the fact that the Raptors have that full surround. So, Bull Centaurs are dead. They're going to be broken off here. Only a handful of models remaining, and Malus now going after the Lord Prophet on top his Baal Taurus. And he could get some really good damage in here now that Cold One Knights are coming in from the other side too. So Cold One Knights, even though they kind of had a rough start and they were whittled down, those who have survived have really made a huge impact. Iron within, iron without, and everything they get their hands on, they are destroying with those armor-piercing maces. Knights of the Ebon Claw do not have a lot of HP left, but man, they are really making their presence known here in the mid and late stages of this battle. Malus Darkblade in the thick of a bunch of Ironsworn. That is a big question the Dark Elves are going to have to answer. How do you deal with all those armored 64 MD elite infantry? But the first thing they need to do is get rid of these single entities, because once the infantry are isolated, it becomes way easier to kill them off. This is Falcon, though. He's not going to make that a simple task, and as the Knights of the Ebon Claw and Cold One Knights pile in, they will have to retreat to dodge the piercing bolts of burning. They'll get out of the way in time, and it looks like the Great Taurus will fall to the Warp Sword of Cain. Malus Darkblade has killed so many monsters in his travels, and yet another one will fall. And as it drops in a rather melodramatic fashion, we have Pan's Impenetrable Pelt upgraded on the Dreadknights and Cold One Knights. The Dark Elves have brought this one back from the brink of defeat. They have made this a balanced and relatively even game. The Cav is running out of steam. They have had to contend with this Baal Taurus for quite a long time, shadowing their every movement. Breath attacks from the skies, flare pistol shots, all those things taking their toll over this 8-minute battle thus far. Hashan's Dark Ravagers returned, with the Blood Price and Demon's Curse activated by Malus Darkblade, and he saw this Cav might come back. He wants none of it. He's going after them. He is going to ensure that we see no more Bull Centaurs for the rest of this battle. 1,350 HP remaining on those elite bodyguard cavalry, but the monstrous Cav cannot take on the Warp Sword of Cain, and Malus Darkblade all by himself will chase them down and kill off 3 of their number before they shatter completely. That is something straight out of a movie. He is styling on these dudes, and they're gone. So the downside to that play, one that I think might have still been the right call, is the fact that the Cold One Knights on this side are now isolated. And that does allow the Sorcerer Prophet to chase them down and kill them off. Not sure they're going to be able to shatter completely. Speed bonus here will actually help a lot from Pan's Pelt. With the Sorcerer and the Cav routed off, not a lot for either army remaining now. And as we've seen so many times in the past, this will come down to a last stand from Malus Darkblade. And while this is hardly the ideal situation for the Scourge of Cain, it's potentially a winnable one. Because while the Infernal Ironsworn are really tanky, have a lot of MD, and still have a decent amount of health remaining, Malus is on Spite, he's full health, he's got the Warp Sword of Cain for regen, and he can keep activating his spells until he drops low, and then, and only then, will he unleash Zarkan, which is of course just another level entirely in terms of damage output against blobs of infantry. He does have to be careful though, because if you look at that balance of power, if that shifts too heavily in the Chaos Dwarf's favor, he has 1,400 value right now, so still doing a lot, and it looks like Falcon's being smart, pulling away to ensure that Malus can't keep hitting all his troops at once, but he does need to be careful, because if that balance shifts too far, then army losses might kick in, and you wouldn't be able to transform into Zarkan in time. And you guys have seen a couple battles on my channel where Malus waited a little bit too late to transform, and the game just ended while he was transitioning to demon form. Zarkan is here now, and Zarkan is a big problem. He has 2 extremely powerful abilities, one of which, actually both of which, are really good for wave clear and manipulating enemy morale. And so that's why Falcon pulled away, because he realized if I get a full surround off on Malus and he turns into demon form, then I'm going to be in pain. Reaper of Souls will suck off those Infernal Ironsworn. Hell yeah, brother. Cheers for my rack. And it's going to heal Zarkan back up. So, multiple big-time abilities being sent the way of the Infernal Ironsworn. One of them just rounded off or got very close to doing so. Zarkan's holding on. And the Sorcerer Prophet does not want to land because he knows if he goes into a duel here, it might not go very well for him. The Baal Taurus is not a bad duelist, but not one that can take on Zarkan in a 1v1. So we'll double fast forward for a second here. Finally, he says, okay, you know what? We're going to take a fight. Maybe we can cause some kind of rout. Zarkan, of course, is unbreakable, so more like just trying to out-DPS him. And while this is dangerous, because it could give the demon the ability to bring this one back in the Dark Elves' favor, I think getting some attacks in from the flank or rear is very smart, because if you just wait for all your infantry to die to these kind of AoE spells, you might not have any support left, and then the Lord in a 1v1 is just going to have his trachea pulled out through his butthole. Like, it would just be really, really bad for that Baal Taurus. So engaging while the Infernal Ironsworn are still alive is the right call. But as the balance bar is now 90-10 in favor of the Dawizar, take a look at the Sorcerer Prophet's health pool. It's going to start dropping, and fast at that. It was at 4,000, it's at 3,600. One more attack from the demon, down to 3,200. Couple more, more HP drains. Oh, it's getting so nasty. Look at that DPS. Immediate 2,000 burst damage. Sorcerer Prophet's down to 2,000 health now. The infantry is close to routing. Zarkan is straight up beasting it, but it might be just a little bit too much. He's going to drain out as the bull charges in from behind, and that will be your battle. So, a couple of things there that I think I should have changed with the Dark Elves build and overall strategy. Honestly, I liked my build. I think the build worked out great, and actually as that explosion hit at the end, I think the Ironsworn would have routed from that. Zarkan was awesome in the late game there. The biggest thing, and Falcon and I were talking about it, was the Executioner should have been deployed on my left flank, on the backside of that hill, and away from the archers and the Ironsworn. If I use those Executioners better there, there's a very good chance I end up winning that game, because if they get a clean charge off into Ironsworn without getting instantly blown up by naphtha bombs, we're going to have a much better outcome overall. And the Ironsworn were a problem in the late game there, because they dealt a lot of damage to Malus and to Zarkan. So you can't get away with that against every faction. There's certain factions where having your elite infantry out on the flank is actually a bad idea, because monstrous cavalry or something could really punish them heavily. In this situation, I think it would have been, or skirmish cav would have been an even bigger problem in that instance, but didn't really have to worry about that here. Having them out on the flank and then engage later once the Bleak Swords were all dead could have been enough to turn that in my favor, but overall, some pretty nice plays from the Cold One Knights, and the Ironsworn were awesome this game. Well played to Falcon. GG.